The abandoned Omega had stopped believing in rescue long ago. Sable lived where no one would find her, deep in the Thornmire forest where even wolves feared to tread. She had no pack, no family, no future. Just the crushing weight of a curse she never asked for, and a death she could never undo. They called her Shadow Blood, the mate killer, the Omega whose very essence was poison to any alpha who dared claim her. She had watched her first intended mate die in her arms, his teeth still in her throat, his body convulsing as her blood destroyed him from the inside. So when Sable found the stranger bleeding out in the frozen creek bed, half dead and burning with fever, she should have walked away. She should have let the forest claim him the way it claimed everything else. But she didn't. She dragged him to her cottage, cleaned his wounds, fought to keep him alive through 3 brutal nights. She told herself it was simple mercy. She told herself she owed nothing to this man she didn't know. She never expected him to wake up and change everything. She never expected him to be the Alpha King. And she certainly never expected him to offer her the one thing she'd been denied her entire life: belonging. But kings don't rescue cursed Omegas without reason, and Castiana Valdrin had a condition of his own. He needed her shadow blood to survive. Neither of them understood that survival would be the least of what they'd give each other. The storm had been screaming for 3 days. Sable pressed another log into the dying fire, watching sparks spiral up toward the cracked chimney. Her cottage groaned against the wind, old bones protesting the assault. She'd patched the roof twice this winter already. It wouldn't survive a third time. Outside, the Thornmire forest bent and howled. No sane creature ventured out in weather like this. No sane creature lived out here at all. That's what made her perfect for it. Sable pulled her threadbare shawl tighter and moved to check her meager food stores. Half a sack of grain, some dried venison from a deer that had wandered too close last autumn. Enough to last perhaps another week if she rationed carefully. After that, she'd have to venture toward the village. Wear her hood, keep her head down, trade pelts for supplies while pretending she didn't see the way they looked at her. Mate killer, shadow blood, monster. She'd heard all the whispers. She'd learned to let them slide off her like rain off stone. What choice did she have? The alternative was dying alone in the woods, and despite everything, some stubborn part of Sable refused to give them that satisfaction. The wind shifted, and she paused. There was something else beneath the storm's fury, a sound that didn't belong. Sable moved to the window, wiping frost from the warped glass. Through the swirling white, she could see nothing but trees bent nearly horizontal. The sound came again, a wolf's howl, but wrong somehow, broken, agonized. She should ignore it. Wolves came and went in the Thornmire, and none of them were her concern. She'd severed her connection to her kind 3 years ago, when they'd driven her out with stones and fire. But the howl rose again, weaker now, and something in it caught in her chest like a fishhook. Fool, Sable muttered to herself as she grabbed her cloak. Absolute fool. She shoved open the door and plunged into the storm. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, turning her fingers to ice within seconds. She pushed forward, following the sound through snowdrifts that reached her waist, through trees that clawed at her like grasping hands. The creek bed was frozen solid this time of year. She almost missed him entirely, his dark fur nearly invisible against the ice-crusted rocks. But then she saw the blood. So much blood. A crimson stain spreading across the white, steaming in the frozen air. A wolf lay crumpled at the water's edge, massive, black as midnight, and dying. Sable approached cautiously, her heart pounding. Wild wolves were dangerous enough. Injured ones were unpredictable. And this one, even half dead and bleeding out, radiated a power that made her wolf whimper inside her. Her wolf. That pathetic, weakened thing that had been silent for 3 years. It stirred now, pressing against her consciousness with an urgency she didn't understand. "Easy," Sable whispered, crouching low. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's eyes opened. Gold. Pure, burning gold that seemed to glow even in the storm's darkness. They fixed on her with an intelligence that was entirely too human, and Sable's breath caught. Then the wolf's form shimmered, blurred, and suddenly, it wasn't a wolf lying in the snow at all. It was a man, naked, bleeding from a wound in his side that looked like claw marks and something worse. Poison, maybe. His skin was deathly pale, but even so, Sable could see he was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that made her chest ache for reasons she refused to name. High cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, dark hair matted with blood and ice. And those eyes, still open, still watching her, still impossibly gold. His lips moved, a word she couldn't hear over the wind. "Hold on," Sable said. She didn't know why she said it. She didn't know why she was already calculating how to drag him back to her cottage. She only knew that leaving him here to die felt like something she couldn't do. He was too heavy to carry. She managed to hook her arms beneath his shoulders and pull, her boots slipping on the ice, her muscles screaming in protest. Inch by agonizing inch, she dragged him up the creek bank and toward the tree line. By the time she reached her cottage, she couldn't feel her hands. She couldn't feel anything except the burning in her lungs and the desperate need to get him somewhere warm. She hauled him inside and slammed the door against the storm. For a long moment she simply stood there, breathing hard, staring down at the unconscious stranger bleeding on her floor. "What have you done?" she asked herself aloud. No answer came, just the howling wind and the crackle of dying embers. Sable got to work. She built up the fire until it roared. She stripped away what remained of his shredded clothing and cleaned the wound in his side, wincing at the blackened edges of the flesh. Definitely poison. She'd seen wounds like this before, back when she'd been allowed to train as a healer's apprentice, before everything had gone wrong. She applied a poultice of dried herbs, hoping it would be enough, knowing it probably wouldn't. Then she wrapped him in every blanket she owned and sat back on her heels, exhausted. He was still beautiful, even ravaged by fever and violence. More beautiful than anyone had a right to be. His face had a severity to it, a sharpness that suggested he wasn't accustomed to softness. But in sleep, with his brow furrowed against pain, he looked almost vulnerable. Sable realized she was staring and looked away abruptly. "Survive the night," she told him quietly. "Then you can leave and we'll both forget this happened." The hours crawled past. She dozed in the chair beside him, jerking awake every time his breathing changed, every time he moaned or shifted. The fever raged through him like wildfire, and she fought it with cool cloths and whispered prayers to gods she'd stopped believing in. Sometime near dawn, his eyes opened again. Sable lurched forward, pressing a hand to his chest to keep him from rising. His skin was furnace hot beneath her palm, but his gaze was clearer now, focused. "Don't move," she commanded. "You'll tear your stitches." He stared at her. Those gold eyes swept over her face, her tangled dark hair, her rough spun clothes, taking her measure in a single glance. "Where?" he rasped. His voice was deep, ruined by pain and disuse. "My cottage, Thornmire Forest." Sable kept her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her fingers. "You were dying in the creek bed. I brought you here." Something flickered across his features. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief. "You saved me." It wasn't a question, but Sable nodded anyway. He was silent for a long moment. Then his hand came up, impossibly fast for someone so wounded, and closed around her wrist. Sable's heart stopped. His grip was iron, his eyes were molten gold. And when he spoke again, his voice held a command that vibrated through her very bones. "Who are you?" Sable's instinct screamed at her to pull away, to run. But his grip on her wrist wasn't painful, and something in his gaze held her frozen. "I'm no one," she said carefully. "Just an Omega who lives alone in these woods." His eyes narrowed. "No one lives in the Thornmire. The Pax declared it cursed territory decades ago." "Then I suppose I fit right in?" She hadn't meant to say it. The words slipped out before she could stop them, bitter and honest in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. The stranger studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then his grip loosened, and Sable snatched her hand back, rubbing her wrist though it didn't hurt. "You should rest," she said, standing abruptly. "The poison in your wound was severe. I've done what I can, but you need time to heal." "Poison." He tested the word as if confirming something he already knew. His jaw tightened. "Shadowbane." Sable paused in the act of reaching for her water pitcher. Shadowbane was rare, expensive, the kind of poison used by assassins, not common wolves. "Someone wanted you dead," she observed. "Someone always wants me dead." He said it flatly, without self-pity. A simple statement of fact. Questions burned on Sable's tongue, but she swallowed them. His business was not her business. The sooner he healed, the sooner he would leave, and the sooner she could go back to her quiet, isolated existence. She brought him water and helped him drink, supporting his head with one hand while he swallowed greedily. Up close, she could smell him beneath the blood and sickness. Pine and winter air and something darker. Something that made her wolf press against her consciousness again, whining softly. She ignored it. "The fever should break by tomorrow," Sable said, settling him back against the blankets. "After that, a few more days of rest. Then you can return to wherever you came from." He caught her hand again before she could retreat. Gentler this time. "You haven't told me your name." Sable hesitated. Names had power among their kind. Giving hers to a stranger felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate. But he was watching her with those golden eyes, and something about the way he looked at her made her feel seen in a way she hadn't been in years. "Sable," she said quietly. "Sable." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "It suits you." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't ask his name either. She simply pulled her hand free and retreated to her chair by the fire, putting distance between them. The stranger closed his eyes and slept. The fever broke on the second morning, just as Sable had predicted. She woke to find him sitting up, examining the bandages wrapped around his torso with a clinical detachment. His color was better. The deathly pallor had faded, replaced by something that looked almost healthy. "You shouldn't be moving," Sable said from her chair. He glanced at her. "I've survived worse." She didn't doubt it. Even wounded and weakened, he carried himself like a weapon. Every movement was controlled, economical, and dangerous. "Your poultice worked," he continued, touching the bandage over his wound. "Better than the royal healers, if I'm being honest." Sable went very still. "Royal healers. Who are you?" The question came out sharper than she intended. He regarded her steadily. No evasion in his expression, no attempt to deflect. "My name is Castienne." The name hit her like a physical blow. Castienne. There was only one Castienne among the wolf kingdoms. Only one man who bore that name. The Alpha King of Valdrin. Ruler of the largest and most powerful pack in the realm. Commander of 10,000 wolves. The man whose word was law for every shifter from the Thornmire to the southern seas. The man she had dragged through the snow and stripped naked and tended like a common patient. Sable's blood turned to ice. "You're lying," she heard herself say. Castienne raised one dark eyebrow. "Why would I lie?" "Because." She was standing now, though she didn't remember rising. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Because you're the Alpha King. You have guards, Armies, healers. You wouldn't be dying alone in a frozen creek bed in cursed territory. And yet, he said quietly, here I am. Sable shook her head. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Kings didn't stumble into her forest. Kings didn't let themselves be saved by abandoned omegas with nothing to offer. You need to leave. Her voice came out strangled. Now. Today. Castian's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, became more alert. Why? Because I can't. She pressed her palms to her temples, trying to think through the panic clawing at her chest. I can't be involved with anything to do with you, with royalty, with pacts. I left that world behind for a reason. What reason? The question was soft, almost gentle, but Sable heard the command beneath it, the king asking for truth. It doesn't matter, she said. What matters is that you're healed enough to travel. Your people must be searching for you. I can point you toward the nearest village. After that, we never speak of this again. Silence stretched between them. Castian watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're afraid, he observed. I'm practical. You're terrified. He rose from the bed in one fluid motion, the blanket falling away to reveal the hard planes of his chest, the dark trail of hair descending past the bandage. Sable looked away quickly, heat flooding her cheeks. I've done nothing to threaten you, he continued, moving closer. You saved my life. I owe you a debt. Then repay it by leaving. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, close enough that his scent wrapped around her like a physical touch. Tell me what you're running from, he said quietly, and I'll consider it. Sable's hands clenched at her sides. The truth sat on her tongue like broken glass. She hadn't spoken it aloud in 3 years, hadn't admitted to anyone what she was. But he was watching her, waiting. And something in those golden eyes made her believe, against all reason, that he wouldn't look at her the way everyone else had. Shadow blood, she whispered. Castian went utterly still. I was born with shadow blood, Sable continued, the words spilling out like a wound finally lanced. Any alpha who tries to mark me dies. The poison in my blood kills them. Her voice cracked. I watched my intended mate convulse and die with his teeth still in my throat. I was 17 years old. The memory rose unbidden. Corvin's body jerking against hers, the light leaving his eyes, his blood and hers mixing on the mating bed. They called me a monster, she finished flatly. They drove me out with fire and stones. And they were right to do it. Anyone who claims me dies. That's what I am. That's why you need to leave. She waited for the disgust, the horror, the immediate retreat. Instead, Castian laughed. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was a low, disbelieving sound that seemed torn from somewhere deep in his chest. Shadow blood, he repeated, shaking his head slowly. Of course it would be you. Sable stared at him. What? Before he could answer, the thunder of hoofbeats erupted outside, voices shouting, the unmistakable presence of wolves, dozens of them, surrounding her tiny cottage. Castian's expression hardened into something regal and remote. My men, he said, they've found me. The door burst open. Armed wolves flooded into the cottage, their eyes scanning for threats, their weapons drawn. When they saw their king standing shirtless and bandaged in the middle of a stranger's home, they dropped immediately to one knee. Your Majesty, the lead guard said, his voice thick with relief. We've been searching for 3 days. We feared the worst. Castian acknowledged them with a brief nod. Then he turned back to Sable, who stood frozen against the wall, her heart in her throat. This woman saved my life, he announced. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. She will be coming with us to Valdrin. Sable's blood ran cold. What? No. I never agreed to that. Castian met her eyes. Something burned in his gaze, something that looked almost like hunger. You have shadow blood, he said quietly, so only she could hear. I was poisoned with Shadowbane. Do you understand what that means? Sable's mind raced. Shadowbane. Shadowblood. The names were too similar to be coincidence. Your blood is the only thing that can save me, Castian continued. The poison is still in my system. It will kill me within a month without a cure. He stepped closer, close enough that she could count the shades of gold in his eyes. You are the cure, Sable. The only one. The words hung between them like a death sentence. And if I refuse? She whispered. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Something sadder than that. Then I die, he said simply. And you go back to being alone in your cursed forest. The choice is yours. The carriage rattled along the frozen road, carrying Sable away from the only home she'd known for 3 years. She sat rigid on the velvet seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching the Thornmire forest disappear through the frost-covered window. She was a fool. An absolute fool. She could have refused. Could have let the Alpha King ride away to die of his poison, while she returned to her quiet, isolated existence. No one would have blamed her. No one would have even known. But she hadn't refused, because when Castian had looked at her with those golden eyes and spoken of death with such casual acceptance, something inside her had cracked open. Something she'd thought long dead. She didn't want him to die. It was that simple, and that terrifying. The carriage was luxurious in a way Sable had never experienced. Thick cushions, fur blankets to ward off the cold. Even a small brazier filled with glowing coals. The guards had offered her hot cider and fresh bread when they'd stopped briefly to rest the horses. They treated her like she mattered, like she was someone worth protecting. It made her deeply uncomfortable. Castian rode alongside the carriage on a massive black stallion, surrounded by his personal guard. She caught glimpses of him through the window, straight-backed and commanding despite the bandage still wrapped beneath his traveling cloak. Every inch a king. He hadn't spoken to her since they'd left the cottage, hadn't explained anything beyond his initial declaration, just informed his men that she was to be given every comfort and respect, then mounted his horse and taken his place at the head of the procession, as if she were already something that belonged to him. Sable pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried not to think about what awaited her in Valdrin. The palace rose from the surrounding city like a mountain of white stone and gleaming towers. Sable had never seen anything so large, so impossibly grand. The entire Thornmire could have fit inside its walls with room to spare. The carriage passed through gates guarded by wolves in silver armor. Courtiers paused in their conversations to stare. Servants stopped their work and whispered behind their hands. Word was spreading. The king had returned, and he'd brought something unexpected with him. The carriage stopped, and a footman opened the door with a deep bow. "My lady," he said, "welcome to Valdrin." My lady. The words felt wrong. Sable was no lady. She was an abandoned Omega with cursed blood and nothing to her name but the ragged clothes on her back. But she stepped out anyway, because what choice did she have? Castian was already dismounting, tossing his reins to a waiting groom. He moved toward her with that fluid, predatory grace that seemed as natural to him as breathing. "This way," he said, and turned toward the palace without waiting for a response. Sable followed. What else could she do? The interior was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of wolves running beneath moonlit skies, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, tapestries depicting ancient battles and legendary kings. Everywhere, people stopped and stared. Sable kept her eyes forward, her chin high, refusing to let them see how small she felt. Castian led her through a maze of corridors until they reached a heavy wooden door guarded by two massive wolves in human form. "The council chamber," he said. "There are people you need to meet." He pushed open the door before she could protest. The room was full of wolves, powerful ones. Sable could feel their dominance pressing against her like a physical weight. They sat around a long table laden with maps and documents, and every single one of them turned to stare as she entered. "Your Majesty." An older man with silver hair and cold blue eyes rose from his seat. "We received word of your return, but we weren't informed you'd be bringing a guest." "This isn't a guest, Lord Varen." Castian moved to the head of the table, gesturing for Sable to stand beside him. "This is Sable. She saved my life in the Thornmire." Murmurs rippled through the room. The man called Varen studied her with barely concealed disdain. "A Forest Omega?" His lip curled. "Surely you could have found a more appropriate way to repay such a debt, Your Majesty." "She's not here as repayment." Castian's voice hardened. "She's here because she possesses shadow blood." The murmurs died instantly. Every face around the table went pale. "Shadow blood," Varen repeated slowly. "That's impossible. Shadow blood wolves haven't been seen in over a century." "And yet here she stands." Castian placed his hand on Sable's shoulder. The touch was firm, possessive, claiming. "She is the cure for the Shadowbane poison currently killing me. The only cure." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Sable felt dozens of eyes boring into her, assessing, calculating. Some with fear, some with something that looked disturbingly like hunger. "The ancient texts speak of this," a woman at the far end of the table said quietly. She was younger than the others, with dark skin and intelligent eyes. "Shadow blood can neutralize Shadowbane. It's the only known antidote." "Which is why she will remain under my protection," Castian continued. "Anyone who threatens her, insults her, or makes her feel unwelcome in any way will answer to me personally." His gaze swept the room, cold and absolute. "Is that understood?" Heads nodded quickly. Even Varen inclined his head, though his expression remained sour. "Now." Castian's hand tightened briefly on Sable's shoulder before releasing her. "Leave us. All of you. I need to speak with her privately." The council filed out, casting curious glances at Sable as they passed. The woman who'd spoken about the ancient texts offered her a small, encouraging smile before disappearing through the door. Then they were alone. Castian moved to the window, staring out at the sprawling city below. For a long moment, he said nothing. "You're wondering why I really brought you here," he said finally, without turning around. "You need my blood to survive," Sable replied. Her voice was steady, but her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. "You made that clear." "Yes." He turned to face her. The afternoon light caught the gold in his eyes, making them burn. "But that's not the only reason." Sable's breath caught. "Then what?" Castian crossed the room until he stood before her. Close enough to touch. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the space between them. "The Shadowbane was administered by someone in my own court," he said quietly. "Someone I trusted. They've been trying to kill me for months, and they nearly succeeded." His jaw tightened. "I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who has no connection to the politics of Valdrin. Someone who has no reason to want me dead." "And you think that's me?" Sable shook her head. "You don't know anything about me. I know you saved my life when you could have let me die." His voice softened. "I know you live alone in cursed territory because your own kind drove you out. I know you carry a secret that should make you my enemy, but instead makes you the only person who can save me." He reached out and caught her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "Stay," he said. "Help me find the traitor. Let me protect you from whatever you're running from. And in return, I will give you something you've never had." "What?" The word came out barely above a whisper. A place to belong. The promise hung between them like a golden thread. Sable wanted to believe it, wanted it so desperately that her chest ached with longing. But she'd believed promises before. She'd trusted before. And she bore the scars to prove how that had ended. "You don't understand," she said, pulling away from his touch. "Shadow blood isn't just poison to alphas who try to claim me. It's a curse. Anyone who gets too close to me suffers. Anyone who cares about me dies." Her voice cracked. "You want to use my blood as medicine? Fine. But don't pretend this is anything more than a transaction. Don't pretend you actually want me here." Castian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like pain. "You think I don't understand curses?" he asked softly. "You think I don't know what it means to carry a burden that destroys everyone around you?" Before Sable could respond, he reached up and unfastened the collar of his traveling cloak. Then he pulled down the edge of his shirt, revealing his chest. There, over his heart, was a mark. Not a wound or a scar. A brand. A symbol burned into his skin that pulsed with faint, sickly light. "Every Alpha King of Valdrin is marked at birth," Castian said flatly. "It binds our wolf to the throne, gives us the power to rule." His eyes met hers. "It also slowly kills us. No king of my line has lived past 40. Most die far younger." Sable stared at the mark, at the way the light within it flickered like a dying flame. "I was poisoned because someone wants the throne before my time runs out," Castian continued. "But even without the Shadowbane, I have perhaps 5 years left. Maybe less." He refastened his shirt, covering the mark. "So, when I tell you I understand curses, I mean it. When I tell you I'm not afraid of what you are, I mean that too." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his breath against her forehead. "We're both dying, Sable. Both cursed. Both alone." His voice dropped to something low and rough. "Maybe that's exactly why we can help each other." Sable's throat tightened. The words he spoke were impossible. The hope he offered was dangerous. But when she looked into his golden eyes, she saw something she recognized. The same hollow loneliness she'd carried for 3 years. The same desperate hunger for connection. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked carefully. Castian's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "A partnership," he said. "You help me survive long enough to find my would-be assassin. In return, I give you protection, comfort, and a place in my household." He paused. "And when we've caught the traitor, if you wish to leave, I won't stop you." It was reasonable, measured, a fair exchange between two people who had nothing left to lose. So why did Sable feel like she was stepping off a cliff? "All right," she heard herself say. "I'll stay." The smile that crossed Castian's face was real this time. Brief, but real. "Then welcome to Valdrin, Sable." He extended his hand. "Partner." She took it. His grip was warm and strong, and when their palms touched, a spark of something electric passed between them. Neither of them acknowledged it. Neither of them pulled away. From the doorway came a voice, sharp and feminine and dripping with disdain. "Your Majesty, how touching." Sable turned. A woman stood in the entrance, beautiful in a cold, polished way, with auburn hair piled high and a gown of deep crimson that probably cost more than everything Sable had ever owned. But it was her eyes that made Sable's blood chill. Pale green and calculating, they swept over Sable with the same regard one might give an insect. "Lady Morgaine," Castian said, his voice carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you." Clearly. The woman glided into the room, her gaze never leaving Sable. "The court is buzzing with rumors about your new pet, my king. An Omega from the Cursed Forest. Shadowblood, they say." Her smile was razor sharp. "How desperate you must be." "Careful," Castian warned. Oh, I'm always careful. Lady Morgaine stopped directly in front of Sable, looking down at her with open contempt. You should be careful too, little Omega. Valdrin isn't the forest. Here, there are far worse things than wolves. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. And some of us don't take kindly to strays. She swept out before Sable could respond, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and cold malice in her wake. Sable's hands were trembling. She clasped them together to hide it. Who is that? She asked quietly. Castian's expression had gone hard. Dangerous. Lady Morgaine Blackthorn, he said, the most powerful noblewoman in Valdrin. His jaw tightened, and one of the people who had opportunity to poison me. The words settled into Sable's chest like stones. She had agreed to help find an assassin. She hadn't realized that assassin might find her first. The presentation ceremony was to take place at sunset. Sable stood in the center of a room larger than her entire cottage, surrounded by servants who moved around her like a flock of nervous birds. They'd bathed her in rose-scented water, scrubbed 3 years of forest grime from her skin, and brushed her dark hair until it gleamed. Now they were dressing her in silk. Hold still, my lady, the headmaid murmured, fastening the final clasps at Sable's shoulders. The fabric is delicate. My lady. There it was again. Sable wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Yesterday she'd been eating dried venison in a crumbling cottage. Today she was being wrapped in midnight blue silk that probably cost more than her father had earned in his entire life. Her father. She pushed the thought away before it could take root. That life was over. Those people were gone. There. The maid stepped back, admiring her work. You look beautiful, my lady. Sable turned to face the mirror and went still. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. The silk gown clung to her curves in ways that made her feel exposed, despite being fully covered. Her dark hair had been braided and pinned with silver clasps. Her skin, no longer weathered and windburned, looked almost luminous in the candlelight. She looked like she belonged here. The thought terrified her. A knock at the door made her jump. The maid hurried to answer it, then dropped into a deep curtsy. Your Majesty. Castian stepped into the room and Sable's breath caught. He was dressed in black, as seemed to be his custom, but tonight the black was velvet trimmed with silver thread that caught the light when he moved. A thin crown of dark metal rested against his brow. He looked every inch a king. And he was staring at her like he'd never seen a woman before. Leave us, he said to the servants without looking away from Sable. They scattered immediately, closing the door behind them. Silence stretched between them. Castian's golden eyes moved slowly over her, taking in the gown, the braided hair, the silver clasps. His expression was unreadable. You clean up well, he said finally. Sable snorted despite herself. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation. The corner of his mouth twitched. The compliment would be that you looked better covered in mud and bleeding from dragging my unconscious body through the snow. She blinked. Did you just make a joke? I've been known to occasionally. He moved closer, and Sable caught his scent again. Pine and winter and that underlying darkness that made her wolf stir restlessly. The ceremony will begin soon. I wanted to prepare you for what to expect. More staring? More whispers? She kept her voice light, but her hands had begun to tremble. She clasped them together to hide it. I've survived worse. Castian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. The court will want proof of what you are. They'll want to see shadow blood demonstrated. Sable's stomach dropped. How? A small cut. A single drop of your blood placed in a vial of mine. He must have seen the fear flash across her face because he added quickly, It won't harm me. Not through glass. But it will prove to the skeptics that you are what I claim. And if I refuse? Then the court will never accept you. They'll call you a fraud. A forest witch who bewitched their king. His voice hardened. And Lady Morgaine and her allies will use that doubt to destroy any protection I try to give you. Sable closed her eyes. She thought of the way Morgaine had looked at her. The barely concealed malice. The promise of worse to come. All right, she said quietly. I'll do it. Castian nodded. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small vial on a silver chain. Inside, something dark swirled like smoke trapped in glass. This is my blood, he said, taken this morning for the demonstration. He pressed the vial into her palm, his fingers lingering against hers. Keep it. During the ceremony, you'll add your blood to mine in front of the court. When they see the reaction, no one will question what you are. Sable stared at the vial, his blood, the blood of an alpha king, in her hand. Why give this to me now? She asked. Castian's eyes met hers. Because I want you to understand something. His voice dropped low. My blood is in your hands. Literally. If you wanted to destroy me, you could. You could walk into that ceremony and expose the vial to open air. Watch my blood burn from the inside out. His jaw tightened. I'm trusting you with the weapon that could kill me. The weight of the vial suddenly felt immense. Why? Sable whispered. Because trust has to start somewhere. He pulled back, and the moment of vulnerability was gone, replaced by his usual cold composure. The ceremony begins in an hour. I'll send someone to escort you. He was halfway to the door when Sable found her voice. Castian. He paused but didn't turn. Thank you, she said, for trusting me. For a long moment, he was silent. Then quietly, don't make me regret it. He was gone before she could respond. The great hall was filled with wolves. Sable stood at the entrance, her heart pounding against her ribs, and tried not to let the panic show on her face. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Nobles in silks and velvets, warriors in polished armor, servants lining the walls, all of them watching as the doors swung open to reveal her. Whispers erupted immediately. That's her? The Forest Omega? She doesn't look cursed. Shadowblood is just a legend. The king has lost his mind. Sable lifted her chin and walked forward. The aisle stretched endlessly before her. At the far end, on a raised dais, Castian sat upon a throne of black stone. His crown gleamed in the torchlight. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes. His eyes tracked her every step, burning gold in the firelight. She climbed the steps to the dais and stopped before him. The hall went silent. Kneel, an advisor announced, before your king. Sable hesitated. Kneeling felt wrong somehow, submissive in a way that grated against every instinct she possessed. But Castian rose from his throne before she could comply. No, he said. His voice carried through the hall, silencing the remaining whispers. She will not kneel. Shock rippled through the crowd. The advisor sputtered. Your Majesty, tradition demands that those who save the king's life be honored, not humiliated. Castian descended the steps until he stood directly before Sable, close enough to touch. She pulled me from death when she could have let me die. She owes me nothing. If anyone should kneel, it's the court before her. The silence that followed was deafening. Sable couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He was defending her, publicly, in front of his entire court. The demonstration, Castian said, turning to address the assembled wolves. You want proof of what she is, you'll have it. He extended his hand toward Sable, and she understood. She pulled the vial from where she'd hidden it in her sleeve and held it up for all to see. My blood, Castian announced, contained within glass, harmless. He produced a small silver knife and held it out to her. Your blood now, a single drop. Sable's hands trembled as she took the knife. She pressed the blade to her thumb, wincing as it bit into her flesh. A bead of dark blood welled up. Now add it to the vial, Castian instructed. She uncorked the vial and let her blood fall. The reaction was instant. The dark liquid inside began to glow, faint at first, then brighter, until the entire vial pulsed with silvery light. The mixture swirled violently, then settled into something new, something that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Gasps echoed through the hall. Shadow blood, someone breathed. It's real. The legends are real. Castian took the vial from her hands and held it high. Shadow blood neutralizes Shadowbane, he declared. This woman is the cure for the poison that was meant to kill me. She is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens the crown itself. His eyes swept the crowd, cold and absolute. Is that understood? Heads bowed throughout the hall. Even Lady Morgaine, standing near the front in a gown of blood red, inclined her head, though her eyes never left Sable's face. The demonstration is complete, Castian said. He turned to Sable and offered his hand. Come. She took it. His palm was warm against hers, steady and sure, and something in her chest loosened at the contact. He led her away from the dais, away from the staring crowd, through a side door that opened onto a quiet corridor. Only when they were alone did he release her. You did well, he said quietly. Sable leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. You didn't have to do that. Refused to let me kneel. Yes, I did. She looked up at him. His expression had softened again, just slightly, in that way that made him seem almost human. Why? Because you're not a servant or a supplicant. His voice was low, rough. You're my partner, and partners don't kneel to each other. The words wrapped around her like armor. Protection she hadn't known she needed. The court won't like it, she said. They'll think you're weak. Let them think what they want. Castian's eyes burned into hers. I've been underestimated before. It never ends well for those who do it. Sable believed him. In that moment, looking at the cold fire in his gaze, she believed every word. Now, he said, stepping back. Rest. Tomorrow the real work begins. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the quiet corridor with her racing heart and the silver vial still clutched in her hand. The first blood treatment took place 3 days later. Sable had spent those 3 days exploring the palace under the watchful eyes of assigned guards, meeting with the palace healer to discuss the procedure and avoiding Lady Morgaine at every possible opportunity. The woman was everywhere, at meals, in corridors, always watching, always smiling that sharp, dangerous smile. She's been the king's closest advisor for 5 years. The healer, a kind-faced woman named Isolde, had explained. Some say she expected to be queen. Expected? Sable had asked. Isolde's expression had shuddered. His Majesty has refused every marriage proposal since taking the throne. Lady Morgaine took it personally. Now, standing in the king's private chambers with a silver knife in her hand, Sable understood why Morgaine hated her so viscerally. It wasn't just about the throne. It was about being replaced. You're thinking too loudly. Sable startled. Castian lay on a low couch near the fire, his shirt removed, the mark over his heart exposed. In the firelight, the brand pulsed with that same sickly light she'd seen before. Weaker now, flickering. I was thinking about Lady Morgaine, Sable admitted. A waste of thought. Castian's voice was dry. Though I appreciate the warning. She moved closer, trying not to stare at the expanse of his chest. It was difficult. He was built like a warrior, all lean muscle and controlled power. Scars marked his skin in various places, pale lines that spoke of battles survived. How does this work? She asked, focusing on the practical to avoid the personal. Isolde will guide you. The healer stepped forward, holding a shallow silver bowl. You'll open a vein in your wrist, Let the blood flow into the bowl. Then His Majesty will drink. Sable's stomach turned. Drink my blood. Shadow blood must be ingested to work, Castian said flatly. Applied externally, it is poison to alphas, but consumed willingly, it becomes medicine. His golden eyes met hers. I won't take more than necessary. That's not what concerns me. Then what does? She hesitated. The truth sat on her tongue, uncomfortable and raw. I've never willingly given my blood to anyone, she said finally. Every time it's been taken from me, it's been by force. Healers testing to see if they could cure me. My pack trying to understand why I'd killed Corvin. Her voice cracked on the name. My blood has only ever been a weapon. A curse. You're asking me to trust that it can be something else. Castian was silent for a long moment. Then he sat up, swinging his legs over the edge of the couch, and extended his hand. Come here. Sable approached slowly, her heart hammering. When she was close enough, he took her hand and turned it over, exposing her wrist. His thumb traced the delicate veins beneath her skin. You're not giving me a weapon, he said quietly. You're giving me a gift. Your blood, freely offered, is the only thing that can keep me alive long enough to find the person who's trying to kill me. His eyes lifted to hers. I don't take that lightly. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. All right, she whispered. Isolde stepped forward with the knife. I'll make the cut. You just need to hold still. The blade bit into Sable's wrist, sharp and quick. She gasped at the sting, watching dark blood well up and drip into the silver bowl. It looked almost black in the firelight. Wrong somehow. Tainted. Cursed. But Castian took the bowl from Isolde's hands without hesitation. He looked at Sable one final time, something unreadable in his gaze, and drank. The effect was immediate. Light exploded from the mark over his heart. Not the sickly flickering from before, but a brilliant silver radiance that filled the room. Castian's back arched, his hands gripping the edge of the couch, a sound somewhere between pain and relief torn from his throat. Sable lurched forward, but Isolde caught her arm. Wait, the healer said. This is normal. The light pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then it faded, sinking back into Castian's chest like water absorbed into sand. When it was over, he collapsed back against the couch, breathing hard. But his skin had color now. The deathly pallor was gone, replaced by something warm and vital. Did it work? Sable asked. Castian opened his eyes. The gold seemed brighter than before. Richer. Yes, he breathed. It worked. Isolde moved to bandage Sable's wrist, her hands gentle and efficient. The treatment will need to be repeated weekly until the Shadowbane is fully purged. Perhaps longer, given how advanced the poisoning was. Weekly, Sable repeated. Is that a problem? Castian asked. His voice was still rough, but his gaze was sharp. No. She meant it. Surprisingly, she meant it. I just wasn't expecting to be so involved. The corner of his mouth lifted. You saved my life twice now. Involvement seems unavoidable. Isolde finished the bandage and excused herself, leaving them alone. The fire crackled. Shadows danced across the walls. Sable became acutely aware that Castian was still shirtless, still watching her with those burning golden eyes. You should rest, she said, moving toward the door. Wait. She stopped. Castian rose from the couch with more grace than a man who'd just ingested cursed blood should possess. He crossed the room until he stood before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Thank you, he said. The words were simple. The weight behind them was not. Sable nodded, not trusting her voice. He reached up and touched her face, just his fingertips against her cheek, light as a breath. The contact sent electricity shooting through her veins. You're warm, he murmured. I'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Before she could respond, he pulled away. The moment shattered. "Good night, Sable," he said, his voice once again controlled. Distant. She fled before she could do something foolish like ask him to touch her again. A week passed. Then two. The treatments continued, and with each one, Castian grew stronger. The mark over his heart still flickered, but the light was brighter now, more stable. The shadow of death that had hung over him was slowly lifting. Sable told herself she was glad, told herself her growing investment in his survival was purely practical. They had a deal, a partnership, nothing more. But every time he looked at her with those golden eyes, every time his fingers brushed hers during the blood ritual, she felt the lie crumbling. She was falling for him. The realization came at the worst possible moment, during a formal dinner where she was seated at his right hand, while Lady Morgaine glared daggers from across the table. Castian had leaned close to refill her wineglass, and his breath had ghosted across her ear. "You're not eating." Such a simple observation, such mundane concern, and yet her heart had stuttered like a frightened rabbit. "I'm not hungry," she'd managed. Liar." His voice was warm with amusement. "You're always hungry. You finished 3 servings of venison last night when you thought no one was watching." Heat flooded her cheeks. "You were watching? I'm always watching you." The words had been quiet, meant only for her, but they'd lodged themselves in her chest like an arrow. Now, 3 days later, Sable paced her chambers and tried to figure out what to do. She couldn't fall in love with him. She couldn't. Her blood was poison. Her touch was death. Any alpha who tried to claim her died. But Castian wasn't trying to claim her. He was dying anyway. And somehow, impossibly, her curse was keeping him alive instead of killing him. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Enter," she called. The woman who stepped inside was familiar. The dark-skinned council member who'd spoken about the ancient texts during Sable's first meeting with the court. She offered a warm smile. "Lady Sable, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all." Sable gestured to a chair by the fire. "Please." The woman sat with elegant grace. "We weren't properly introduced. I'm Nalaya, the king's spy master." Sable blinked. "Spy master?" "Someone has to keep track of who's trying to kill him." Nalaya's smile turned wry. "It's a long list, I'm afraid." "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I think we can help each other." Nalaya leaned forward. "You want to find the person who poisoned the king. So do I. And I've noticed something interesting over the past 2 weeks." Sable's pulse quickened. "What?" "His Majesty visits you every night now. Did you know that?" Heat crept up Sable's neck. "He comes to check on my welfare, to discuss the investigation." "At midnight? For hours at a time?" Nalaya's eyes sparkled with knowing amusement. "He's never done that with anyone. Not in the 5 years I've served him." Sable didn't know what to say. It was true that Castian's visits had become longer, more frequent. He'd appear at her door with some excuse, a question about the day's events, a book he thought she might enjoy, and somehow end up staying until the candles burned low. They talked. About everything. About her life in the forest, his burden as king, the dreams they'd abandoned, the fears they couldn't shake. He'd told her about his mother, who had died giving him life. She'd told him about Corvin, about the horror of watching someone die because of what she was. And through it all, he'd never once looked at her with disgust, never once pulled away. "Why are you telling me this?" Sable asked quietly. Nalia's expression softened. "Because I've known Castian since we were children. I've watched him close himself off from everyone, convinced that his curse meant he didn't deserve connection." She paused. "You're changing that. You're changing him." "I'm not trying to. That's exactly why it's working." Nalaya rose, smoothing her skirts. Keep doing what you're doing, Lady Sable. Keep making him feel alive. Her voice dropped. And trust me when I say that some of us in this court are on your side. You're not as alone as you think. She was gone before Sable could respond. That night, Castian arrived later than usual. Sable was already in bed, reading by candlelight, when she heard the knock. Her heart jumped into her throat. Come in. He entered quietly, closing the door behind him. Tonight he wore no crown, no formal attire, just a simple black shirt unlaced at the throat and dark trousers. His hair was loose around his shoulders. He looked exhausted, and beautiful, and unbearably human. I shouldn't be here, he said. Sable set her book aside. And yet you are. And yet I am. He crossed to the chair by her bed and sank into it, running a hand through his hair. I can't sleep. The mark? No. The mark is stable for now. He was quiet for a moment. It's you. Sable's breath caught. Me? Castian lifted his head, and his golden eyes burned in the candlelight. I keep thinking about you. Your voice. Your face. The way you look at me like I'm a man instead of a king. His jaw tightened. I haven't been able to think about anything else for days. The confession hung between them like smoke. Castian, Sable whispered. I know. His voice was rough. I know what you are, what your blood does to alphas. I know I shouldn't want you. He leaned forward, bracing his elbows on his knees. But I do. Gods help me, I do. Sable's hands trembled beneath the blankets. She should tell him to leave, should remind him of the danger, the impossibility, and the curse that would kill him if he tried to claim her. Instead, she said, Stay. Castian's eyes widened. Sable. Just tonight. Her voice cracked. Just stay with me. We don't have to do anything. She swallowed hard. I don't want to be alone anymore. For a long moment he didn't move. Then slowly he rose from the chair and crossed to the bed. He lay down beside her, above the covers, keeping a careful distance between them. But his hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers. Neither do I, he admitted quietly. They lay like that in silence, hands clasped and breathing together in the soft candlelight. Sable felt the warmth of him seeping through the blankets, felt the steady pulse of his heart through their joined hands. It wasn't enough. It was everything. Somewhere in the small hours of the morning, she drifted into sleep, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't dream of death. When she woke at dawn, he was gone. But on the pillow beside her lay a single flower, black petals tipped with silver, native only to the royal gardens, a courting gift. Sable pressed it to her chest and let the tears fall. A month had passed since the first blood treatment. The Shadowbane was nearly purged from Castian's system. Isolde confirmed it during their weekly ritual, her voice warm with relief as she examined the clarity of his blood. One more treatment, the healer announced. Perhaps 2. Then you'll be free of the poison entirely. Free. Sable turned the word over in her mind as she watched Castian button his shirt. Free of the poison meant free of the need for her blood, free of the reason he'd brought her here, free of her. The thought struck her like a blade between the ribs. That's excellent news, Castian said, but his eyes found Sable's across the room, and something unreadable flickered in their golden depths. Thank you, Isolde. You may go. The healer departed, leaving them alone. Silence stretched between them. Outside the windows, snow fell softly over Valdren, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled, and Sable's heart hammered against her ribs. You're thinking too loudly again, Castian observed. She almost smiled. It had become their joke, this phrase, a way of acknowledging the weight of unspoken things. I'm thinking about what happens next, she admitted. Next? When you don't need me anymore. The words came out steadier than she felt. Our deal was clear. I help you survive long enough to find the assassin. You give me protection, and when it's over, I'm free to leave. Castian was very still. Is that what you want? To leave? No. The answer was immediate, visceral, terrifying. But what she wanted didn't matter. It never had. Want is a luxury for people without curses, Sable said quietly. I've learned not to want things. Castian crossed the room in 3 long strides. Before she could react, his hands were cupping her face, tilting it up to meet his burning gaze. Then unlearn it, he said roughly. Want something? Want me? Sable's breath shattered. Castian, I can't. You know what I am, what my blood does. Any alpha who tries to claim me dies. Yes, you've told me. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, featherlight and devastating. But I'm already dying, Sable. The mark will kill me within 5 years. Probably less. His voice dropped to something raw and broken. If I'm going to die anyway, I'd rather die having known what it feels like to love someone. Love. The word hung between them like a held breath. You don't love me, Sable whispered. You can't. I've been told what I can and cannot do my entire life. Castian's forehead dropped to rest against hers. I'm tired of listening. His mouth found hers. The kiss was gentle at first. Questioning. A request rather than a demand. Sable's hands came up to grip his shoulders, meaning to push him away. But somehow they pulled him closer instead. He tasted like winter and wanting, and something she'd never allowed herself to name. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Castian's eyes were molten gold. Stay, he said. Not because of our deal. Not because I need your blood. Stay, because I need you. Sable's vision blurred with tears. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back. I'm asking you to let me love you, even if it kills me. It will kill you. Her voice cracked. That's the point. That's what I am. Then I'll die happy. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Sable felt her resolve crumbling like sand beneath waves. Stay, please. She should say no, should walk away, should protect him from herself. Instead, she said, yes. The next 3 weeks were the happiest of Sable's life. Castian courted her properly, with flowers and gifts and stolen moments in quiet corridors. He took her riding through the palace grounds, teaching her to sit a horse properly instead of clinging to its mane in terror. He brought her to his private library, showed her books of poetry that had belonged to his mother, read her passages by firelight until she fell asleep against his shoulder. And every night, he came to her chambers. Not to claim her, not to do anything that might trigger her curse, but simply to be with her, to talk, to hold her hand, to fall asleep beside her and wake tangled together. The court noticed. Of course they noticed. Whispers followed them everywhere. The king is besotted with the forest Omega. He's lost his mind. She'll be the death of him. Lady Morgaine is furious. Sable tried to ignore the whispers, tried to focus on the warmth of Castian's hand in hers, the way he looked at her like she was something precious instead of something cursed. But the fear never fully left her. It coiled in her chest like a serpent, waiting to strike. Because happiness, in Sable's experience, always came with a price. The assassination attempt came on a moonless night. Sable woke to the sound of shattering glass. Before she could move, hands closed around her throat. She thrashed, clawing at the fingers crushing her windpipe. In the darkness, she could see nothing but shadows, could smell nothing but blood and something chemical. Poison. The attacker leaned close and Sable caught a glimpse of a face hidden behind a black mask. But the scent. She knew that scent. Lady Morgaine sends her regards, a voice hissed. Sable's vision began to darken at the edges. Her lungs screamed for air. She was going to die here, in this beautiful room, in this palace where she'd almost let herself believe she could be happy. Then the door exploded inward. Castian burst through in wolf form, massive and black and radiating fury. His jaws closed around the attacker's shoulder, ripping them away from Sable with a snarl that shook the walls. Sable gasped for breath, clutching her bruised throat. Through streaming eyes, she watched Castian tear the assassin apart. It was over in seconds. The attacker lay still on the floor, blood pooling beneath them, and Castian shifted back to human form. His hands found Sable immediately, running over her face, her throat, checking for damage. "Are you hurt?" His voice was ragged with fear. "Sable, are you—" "I'm fine." She was shaking, but alive. "Castian, I'm fine." He pulled her against his chest and held her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she didn't complain. She buried her face in his shoulder and let the tears come. "Morgaine," she managed between sobs. "The assassin said Lady Morgaine sent them." Castian's entire body went rigid. "Then she dies tonight," he said quietly. The cold certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safe. They found Lady Morgaine in her chambers, calmly sipping wine as if she hadn't just ordered murder. Castian's guards had her surrounded within minutes. She didn't resist, didn't even seem surprised. Just set down her glass and smiled that razor-sharp smile. "Your Majesty," she said pleasantly. "I wondered how long it would take." "You poisoned me." Castian's voice was ice. "You sent assassins after the woman I love. Give me one reason I shouldn't kill you where you stand." Morgaine's eyes flickered to Sable, something ugly moving behind their pale green surface. "Love." She laughed, the sound brittle. "You love that creature? That shadow-blooded freak?" Her lip curled. "I've served you for 5 years. I've stood by your side through every battle, every crisis, and every assassination attempt. And you choose her?" "You were behind the other attempts too," Sable realized aloud. "Of course I was." Morgaine rose from her chair, spreading her hands. "The Shadowbane was just the most recent. I've been trying to kill him for years. Slowly, carefully, making it look like his curse was simply progressing faster than expected." Castian's hands clenched into fists. "Why?" "Because you were supposed to love me." The mask of composure finally cracked. "I waited. I was patient. I did everything right. And you couldn't even look at me." Her voice turned venomous. "So if I couldn't have you, no one would. You'd die, and I'd marry your successor. Finally become the queen I was always meant to be." The confession hung in the air like poison. "Guards," Castian said coldly. "Take her to the dungeons. She'll face trial at dawn." Morgaine laughed again, wild and unhinged. "Trial? You think this is over?" Her eyes fixed on Sable. "Did he tell you the truth about your precious curse, Omega? Did he tell you why Shadowblood wolves were hunted to extinction?" Sable's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Morgaine," Castian warned. "They weren't killed because they were dangerous," Morgaine continued, ignoring him. "They were killed because of what happens when an Alpha King claims one." Her smile turned cruel. "Ask him. Ask him about the prophecy." "Enough." Castian's voice cracked like a whip. "Remove her, now." The guards dragged Morgaine away, but her laughter echoed through the corridors long after she was gone. Sable turned to Castian, her heart pounding. "What prophecy?" she demanded. What was she talking about? Castian's face had gone pale. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly afraid. "Sable, please. Don't lie to me." Her voice shook. "I've been lied to my entire life. If there's something I need to know, tell me. Now." For a long moment he was silent. Then his shoulders slumped. "The curse on my bloodline," he said quietly. "The mark that kills every Alpha King. It was created by a shadow blood wolf centuries ago. Sable's world tilted. What? The first Alpha King betrayed his shadow blood mate, used her blood to fuel a spell that would make his line powerful beyond measure. Castian's voice was hollow. She cursed him with her dying breath, said that every king after him would carry her mark, would die young, never knowing love, just as she had died young and betrayed. Then why? Sable struggled to process. Why would my blood heal you? If a shadow blood wolf created the curse? The prophecy, Castian interrupted. It says the curse can only be broken one way. By an Alpha King who truly loves a shadow blood mate. Not as the first king claimed to love, with betrayal and lies, but genuinely, completely. His eyes met hers. If such a bond is formed, the curse ends. Not just for one king, but for the entire bloodline. Sable's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of a table. You knew, she breathed. You knew this whole time. That's why you brought me here. That's why you... No. Castian crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. I brought you here because I was dying. I courted you because I couldn't help myself. The prophecy, I didn't even believe it was real until... His voice cracked. Until I realized I was falling in love with you. But if you claim me, I'll kill you. Tears streamed down Sable's face. My blood will poison you the moment your teeth break my skin. Or it will save me. His hands trembled against her shoulders. That's what the prophecy says. If the love is true, the claim won't kill. It will break the curse entirely. And if it's not true enough? If something goes wrong? Castian's jaw tightened. Then I die. The words struck Sable like physical blows. No. She pulled away from him. No. I won't let you gamble your life on a prophecy that's centuries old. I won't watch you die because of me. Sable. I already killed one man I cared about. She shouted. I will not kill you too. She turned and fled before he could stop her. Sable ran through the palace without knowing where she was going. Her lungs burned, her eyes streamed, her mind replayed Morgaine's words on an endless, agonizing loop. A shadow blood wolf created the curse. Her kind had doomed his. And now he wanted to risk his life on the chance that her love was somehow different, somehow strong enough to break what had been set in motion centuries ago. It was madness. It was suicide. She couldn't let him do it. Her feet carried her to the stables without conscious decision. A horse. She needed a horse. She would return to the thorn mire, disappear into the forest, make sure Castian never found her again. It was the only way to keep him safe. She was saddling a mare with shaking hands when a voice stopped her cold. Running away, Lady Sable? She spun. Nalia stood in the stable doorway, her dark eyes unreadable. Don't try to stop me, Sable said. I'm doing this for him. Are you? Nalia stepped closer. Or are you doing this for yourself? Because it's easier to run than to face the possibility that you might be enough to save him. The words hit like arrows finding their mark. You don't understand, Sable whispered. I've already killed someone I loved. I can't. Corvin? Nalia's voice was gentle. The man you were supposed to mate 3 years ago? Sable nodded, tears spilling over. I've been investigating Lady Morgaine's crimes, Nalia said quietly. Following every thread, every connection. Do you want to know what I found? Sable couldn't speak, could only stare. 3 years ago, Morgaine visited your pack. She was conducting business with your father, arranging trade agreements on behalf of Valdrin. Nalia paused. She was there the night Corvin died. The world stopped. What? Sable's voice was barely audible. Morgaine has access to dozens of poisons, including ones that mimic the effects of shadow blood. Nalia stepped closer. She knew about the prophecy. She'd spent years researching it, trying to find ways to keep Castian isolated, keep him from ever finding a shadow blood mate. You're saying... Sable couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying Morgaine killed Corvin. Nalaya's voice was firm. She made it look like your blood did it, knowing you'd be blamed, knowing you'd be driven out. She's been eliminating shadow blood wolves for over a decade, ensuring the prophecy could never be fulfilled. Sable's legs gave out. She collapsed against the stable wall, gasping for breath. I didn't kill him, she whispered. I didn't. No. Nalaya crouched beside her. You didn't. You've been carrying guilt for a crime that was never yours. The relief was so overwhelming it felt like drowning. Sable sobbed, great heaving sounds that tore from her chest. Corvin had died, yes, but not because of her curse, because of a woman's jealousy, because of a prophecy she hadn't known existed. For 3 years she'd believed herself a monster, and it had all been a lie. Sable. Nalaya gripped her shoulders. Listen to me. Morgaine is in the dungeons, but her poison is still working. She told you the truth about the prophecy to make you run. She wants you gone so Castian dies anyway. Sable looked up through streaming eyes. If you leave now, she wins. The curse continues. Every future king of Valdrin dies young and alone, just like the ones before. Nalaya's voice hardened. But if you stay, if you let Castian claim you, you could end it. All of it. What if it doesn't work? Sable whispered. What if my blood kills him anyway? Then at least he dies, knowing he was loved. Nalaya's expression softened. That's more than any king of his line has ever had. Sable thought of Castian, his golden eyes, his cold hands that had warmed against her skin. The way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world who mattered. She thought of the first night they'd spent together, holding hands in the darkness, the flowers he'd left on her pillow, the poetry he'd read by firelight. She thought of his voice, rough and broken, saying, if I'm going to die anyway, I'd rather die having known what it feels like to love someone. Slowly, Sable rose to her feet. Where is he? She asked. She found him in his chambers, standing by the window, staring out at the falling snow. He didn't turn when she entered, didn't move at all. But she saw the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his spine. You came back, he said quietly. I came back. Sable closed the door behind her. I'm sorry I ran. Don't be. He finally turned, and she saw the devastation in his eyes, the certainty that he'd lost her. I should have told you about the prophecy from the beginning. I should have... Nalaya told me the truth. Sable crossed the room until she stood before him. About Morgaine, about what she did to Corvin. Castian's eyes widened. I didn't kill him, Sable said, and for the first time she believed it. She did. She's been hunting shadow blood wolves for years, making sure the prophecy could never come true. Sable, his voice cracked. I've been running my whole life, she continued, running from what I am, running from anyone who might get close enough to be hurt by me. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. I'm tired of running. Castian's breath shuddered. I love you, Sable said. I love your cold hands and your golden eyes and the way you make me feel like I'm worth something. I love that you read me poetry and bring me flowers and stay with me through the night even though you could have anyone. Her voice broke. I love you, Castian, and I want you to claim me. His hands came up to grip her wrists. If it doesn't work, then we die together. She pulled his face down to hers. I'd rather die with you than live another day without you. Their mouths met in a kiss that tasted like salt and surrender. Castian's arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him with desperate strength. She felt his heart hammering against her chest, matching the wild rhythm of her own. When they broke apart, his eyes were liquid gold. Are you sure? He whispered. I've never been sure of anything. He lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed. What followed was nothing like the careful, controlled intimacy they'd shared before. This was fire and need, and the desperate urgency of two people who had nothing left to lose. He undressed her slowly, reverently, pressing kisses to every inch of skin he revealed. She pulled at his clothes with shaking hands, needing to feel him against her. When their bodies finally came together, it was like coming home. They moved together in the darkness, lost in each other, and Sable felt something building inside her. Not just pleasure, but something deeper. Something ancient. The mate bond, forming at last. When the moment came, Castian's mouth found the curve of her neck. "I love you," he breathed against her skin. Then his teeth broke through. Sable screamed. Not in pain, but in ecstasy. Light exploded behind her eyes, silver and gold intertwined. She felt her blood flowing into him, felt her curse rising up to claim its due. For one terrible moment she thought it hadn't worked. Thought she felt death reaching for him. Then the mark over his heart erupted. Light poured from it, blinding and brilliant, filling the room like a second sun. Castian's body arched against hers, a sound somewhere between agony and relief torn from his throat. And then, impossibly, the mark began to fade. Sable watched in wonder as the brand that had doomed generations of kings simply dissolved, like shadows fleeing before dawn. When it was over, Castian collapsed against her, breathing hard. "Castian?" Her voice trembled. "Are you?" He lifted his head. His eyes were still gold, but warmer now, brighter. "It's gone," he said, sounding dazed. "The mark, the curse." His hand found her face, cupping her cheek with fingers that were finally, blessedly warm. "It's gone." Sable began to cry, not from sorrow this time, but from pure, overwhelming joy. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Castian kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "You did it," he corrected. "You saved me. We saved each other." He smiled, a real smile, unguarded and beautiful. "Yes," he agreed. "We did." 4 months later, the royal gardens were in full bloom. Sable walked among the flowers, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. 4 months pregnant with their first child, and still she sometimes couldn't believe this was her life. Queen of Valdrin, mate to the Alpha King, carrying the first heir in generations who would be born free of any curse. "You're thinking too loudly again." She turned to find Castian approaching, his golden eyes warm with love. He'd changed in the months since the curse broke. The cold that had lived in him was gone, replaced by warmth that seemed to radiate from his very core. "I'm thinking about how happy I am," Sable admitted. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly. "That's allowed. Is it?" She smiled up at him. "I'm still getting used to it." "Get used to it." He kissed her forehead. "I plan to make you happy for the rest of our lives." From across the garden, Nelia waved. Beside her stood Isolde, and a handful of other women who had become Sable's friends in the months since her coronation. They were setting up a table for the afternoon tea Sable had planned. Lady Morgaine was gone. Tried and executed for treason, her crimes laid bare before the entire kingdom. The shadow blood wolves she'd murdered had been mourned properly at last, and deep in the Thornmire forest, a small cottage stood empty. Sable had visited it once, after everything was over. Had stood in the doorway where she dragged a dying stranger and thanked whatever gods existed that she hadn't let him die. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked Castian now. "What would have happened if I'd just walked away that night?" "Every day," he admitted. "I'd be dead. The curse would continue. My son would be doomed before he was even born." He kissed her again, deeper this time. "But you didn't walk away. You saved me. You saved all of us." Sable leaned into his embrace, breathing in his scent. Pine and warmth and love. "We saved each other," she said. It was true. They'd both been broken when they met, both carrying curses they thought would destroy them, both convinced they didn't deserve love. They'd been wrong about all of it. Castian's hand found hers, intertwining their fingers. "Come," he said. "Your friends are waiting." They walked through the garden together, toward the sunlight and the laughter and the future that stretched before them, bright and beautiful and finally free. Shadow blood and royal curse, death and love. In the end, it was love that won. It was always going to be love.